Encyclopedia Brown. Everyone's favorite boy detective. Takes the case. By Donald J. Sobel. 1. The case of the stolen money. Police officers across America were asking the same question. Why did everyone who broke the law in Idaho get caught? Idaho looked like many seaside towns its size. It had 2 delicatessens, 3 movie theaters, and 4 banks. It had churches, a synagogue, and lovely white beaches. And it had a certain red brick house on Rover Avenue. In the house lived Idaho's secret weapon against lawbreakers, 10-year-old Encyclopedia Brown. Mr. Brown was chief of the Idaho police force. He was proud of his men. But he was not too proud to get them help. Whenever Chief Brown came up against a case that no one on the force could solve, he knew what to do. He went home and ate dinner. Before the meal was over, Encyclopedia had solved the case for him. Chief Brown wanted to tell the world about his only child to announce over satellite television, "My son is the greatest detective who ever shot a water pistol." But what good would it do? Who would believe that the mastermind behind Idaho's spotless police record was only a 5th grader? Encyclopedia never let slip a word about the help he gave his father. He didn't want to seem different from other boys his age. But there was nothing he could do about his nickname. Only his parents and teachers called him by his real name, Leroy. Everyone else called him Encyclopedia. An encyclopedia is a book or set of books filled with facts from A to Z, just like Encyclopedia's had. He had read more books than anyone in Idaho, and he never forgot what he read. His pals swore that if he went to sleep before thinking out a problem, he stuck a bookmark in his mouth. Not all his father's most difficult cases happened in Idaho. Friday evening, for instance, the dinner table conversation turned to a mystery in another town. "Bill Carlton, the Hills Grove chief of police, telephoned me this morning," said Chief Brown. "He has a robbery on his hands that's got him worried." "Isn't Hills Grove up in Canada, dear?" asked Mrs. Brown. "It's in northern Canada," answered Chief Brown. "Even during the summer the temperature sometimes drops below freezing." "The Idaho Police Department is certainly famous," said Mrs. Brown proudly. "Imagine a call for help from Canada." "What was stolen, Dad?" asked Encyclopedia. $10,000, said Chief Brown. "The money was taken 3 days ago from the safe in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Richter." Chief Brown put down his soup spoon. "I have all the facts from Chief Carlton," he said. "But I'm afraid I still can't help him find the thief." "Tell Leroy," urged Mrs. Brown. "He's never tailed you yet." Chief Brown grinned at his son. "Are you ready?" he asked, taking a notebook from his breast pocket. He read what he had written down. "Last Friday Mr. and Mrs. Richter, who have lived in Hills Grove 3 years, flew to Detroit for the weekend. Before leaving, they gave a key to their empty house to a friend, Sidney Auckland, in case of an emergency. On Saturday, Auckland entered the house." "Was it an emergency?" asked Mrs. Brown. "No," replied Chief Brown. "The weather had turned cold. It had dropped below freezing. Auckland said he wanted to be sure there was enough heat in the house." Chief Brown read again from his notebook. "Auckland said he entered the house Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. He had just stepped through the front door when he heard a noise in the study. He called out, 'Who's there?' and opened the study door. 2 men were at the safe. They attacked him. He says he didn't have a chance once they knocked off his eyeglasses. Without them, he can't see 6 inches in front of himself. The 2 men tied him up," he says. "It wasn't until an hour later that he worked himself free and called the police." Did Mr. Auckland get a look at the two men while he still wore his eyeglasses? Asked Mrs. Brown. Yes, replied Chief Brown. He says that if he sees them again, he'll recognize them. Then what is the mystery? Exclaimed Mrs. Brown. Why did Chief Carleton telephone you for help, dear? He suspects Auckland, said Chief Brown. He thinks Auckland stole the money and made up the part about the two men. But he can't prove Auckland is lying. Mrs. Brown glanced at Encyclopedia. As yet the boy detective had not asked his one question, the question that always enabled him to break a case. Encyclopedia had finished his soup. He was sitting with his eyes closed. He always closed his eyes when he did his hardest thinking. Suddenly his eyes opened. What was the temperature in the house, Dad? He asked. Chief Brown looked at his notebook. Auckland says that the house was comfortably warm when he entered it. After finding his eyeglasses and calling the police, he checked the reading. It was 70 degrees. Leroy, murmured Mrs. Brown. Disappointment was in her voice. She was so proud when Encyclopedia solved a mystery for his father before she served the main course. But sometimes she had to wait until dessert. This looked like a dessert case. What is important about heat? She asked. Not any heat, Mom, said Encyclopedia. The heat in the house. I don't follow you, son, said Chief Brown. The house was too hot for Mr. Auckland to have seen two men robbing the safe, answered Encyclopedia. He made them up. How did Encyclopedia know? Encyclopedia helped his father solve mysteries throughout the year. In the summer, he helped the neighborhood children as well. When school let out, he opened his own detective agency in the garage. Every morning he hung out his sign. His first customer Monday afternoon was Scoop McGinnis. Scoop was 5. He could neither read nor write. But with the help of his older sister, he put out a 2-page weekly newspaper, The Cricket. The Cricket was by kids, for kids, and about kids. It stood for good citizenship, zoos, toys, and better hot dogs. It was against bad candy and people who didn't like the cricket. When he came to see Encyclopedia, Scoop was sucking his forefinger. Right away Encyclopedia knew something was wrong. Scoop usually sucked his thumb. You know the old Webster house on the beach? Asked Scoop. Encyclopedia knew it. No one had lived there for years and years. The window glass had fallen out. 6 inches of sand covered the floors. The house is so old it's dangerous, said Encyclopedia. The city plans to knock it down next week. That house was mad, said Scoop. It bited me. You mean it bit you, corrected Encyclopedia. Then he caught himself. Houses don't bite. Look at my finger, said Scoop. Encyclopedia looked. You've got a splinter, he said. Scoop frowned. If that house didn't bite me, then maybe it didn't talk to me. Keep calm, Encyclopedia told himself. I was once 5 years old myself. To Scoop he said, would you mind starting at the beginning, please? This morning after breakfast, I interviewed that house for the cricket, said Scoop. I wanted to know how it felt about being knocked down. That's when it bit you. That's when it talked to me, said Scoop. It said it takes a lot of money to save a house. It told me to go home and bring all my money. I did $1.50. It wasn't enough, guessed Encyclopedia. How did you know? Said Scoop. Because I didn't bring more, the house got mad and bit me, I thought. I dropped the money and ran. Were you alone in the house? Inquired Encyclopedia. Scoop shook his head. As I was running out, I saw a big kid in the next room trying to hide. I think it was Bugs Meany. Bugs, exclaimed Encyclopedia. I might have known he was mixed up in this. Bugs Meany was the leader of the Tigers, a gang of tough older boys. Encyclopedia was often called upon to stop their dishonest doings. Only last week he had put a halt to the Tigers' giant summer pet sale. Bugs had dipped 7 sparrows in peroxide and tried to sell them as canaries. Can you get back my money? Asked Scoop. I'll have to pay you later. Don't worry about it, said Encyclopedia. He took out Scoop's splinter, and the 2 boys set off for the old beach house. Bugs must have seen you run away, Encyclopedia told Scoop. He knew you were heading to see me. He's probably waiting for us with an alibi. Encyclopedia was right. Bugs lay on the porch. He was scratching his dandruff and picking his teeth. When he saw the boy detective, he sat up quickly. Scram, or your face will need help, he snarled. Encyclopedia was used to Bugs' warm welcomes. He nodded and went inside with Scoop. Bugs followed them. Scoop stopped among the many footprints in the deep sand that covered the living room floor. I started to put the $1.50 on that shelf, he said. Then the splinter bit me. I got scared. I dropped the money and ran. Encyclopedia studied the large cracks in the walls. Bugs could have stood in the next room, watching and listening, he said. What's with you 2 crazy cats? Demanded Bugs. I came here for some wood. I'm adding a pool room to the Tigers' clubhouse. You made me think the house was talking, said Scoop. You took my money. I didn't take anything except a nap, said Bugs. The wood in this stump wouldn't make a good slop bucket. He began walking slowly around the room. Your money is still here if you really dropped it, he declared. You shouldn't go around accusing people of stealing. There are laws against that sort of thing. Suddenly he gave a cry and pointed. In the sand on the floor lay a $50. Under it was a $1 bill. Gee gosh, Bugs, stammered Scoop. I thought the worst of you. I'm sorry. Don't be, said Encyclopedia. If you hadn't run out of the room and seen Bugs, he'd have kept your money. What made Encyclopedia so certain? 2. The case of the 2-timers. If Bugs Meany had a goal in life, it was to get even with Encyclopedia. Bugs hated being outsmarted all the time. He longed to sock the boy detective on the side of his face so hard that he could look down his back without turning his head. But Bugs never threw the punch. Whenever he felt like it, he remembered a pair of lightning-fast fists. The fists belonged to Sally Kimball, Encyclopedia's partner. Sally was the prettiest girl in the 5th grade as well as the best athlete. And she had done what no boy under 12 had dreamed possible. She had outpunched Bugs Meany. Every time they had come to blows, Bugs had ended on the ground, mumbling about falling rocks. Because of Sally, Bugs was afraid to use muscle on Encyclopedia. However, he never stopped planning his day of revenge. Bugs hates you as much as he hates me, Encyclopedia warned Sally. He won't ever forgive you for showing him up. I know, said Sally. He's more like a magi-can than a tiger. He can turn anything into trouble. Trouble, thought Encyclopedia, may be where we are heading. The detectives were walking in downtown Idyllville. Half an hour earlier, Lefty Dobbs had telephoned them. Lefty had said to meet him in front of the city hall right away. I wonder why Lefty didn't tell you what this is all about, remarked Sally. Perhaps he couldn't talk freely over the telephone, replied Encyclopedia. Anyway, we'll soon find out. There he is. Lefty was standing outside the city hall. He saw the two detectives, but he didn't wave. Instead, he took off his wristwatch. He's acting awfully nervous, whispered Sally as they drew closer. I don't trust him. With his right hand, Lefty held his watch by the metal strap. Between his left forefinger and thumb he turned the tiny knob that set the time. As he did, he checked the big clock atop the city hall. It showed 5 minutes before 3. Are you okay? Encyclopedia asked him. SSH, hissed Lefty. Keep your voice down. What's the big secret? Asked Sally. Show me your palm, Encyclopedia, said Lefty. Encyclopedia held out his hand, palm upward. Lefty laid 25 cents on it. I want to hire you, he said. For a moment he stared up at the clock atop the city hall with a thoughtful expression. Then he fished into his pocket and took out a $5 bill. He gave it to Encyclopedia. This case is extra tough, he whispered. So Ely pay more. There. You saw it yourself, officer. It was Bugs Meany. He came charging out of a nearby dress shop. Behind him was Officer Hall. I told you we'd catch them in the act, the little crooks, cried Bugs. You'd better have an explanation, Officer Hall said to the detectives. I saw everything through these binoculars Bugs lent me. They've been working this racket for weeks, said Bugs. What racket? Gasped Sally, bewildered. Bugs told me that you wait until some child stops to set his watch by the time on the City Hall clock, said Officer Hall. Then you approach him. You tell him the price for setting his watch is 25 cents. Encyclopedia told me he owned the clock, put in Lefty. Bugs had been shaking his head sadly as he listened. Now he clasped his hands over his chest and put on a righteous face. So many kids came to me with complaints, he said. I knew it was my duty as a good citizen to go to the police. Of course, I hated doing it. I'm so sensitive, so high-strung. You ought to be strung higher, snapped Sally. This is nothing but a frame-up. It's serious, corrected Officer Hall. I saw money change hands. I paid Encyclopedia a quarter for setting my watch, said Lefty. Then he sold me the collection rights for $5. He said I'd make $10 a week easy collecting 25 cents from every watch setter. You poor innocent slob, said Bugs. Encyclopedia doesn't own the clock. You've been cheated. I can't believe it, exclaimed Lefty. Encyclopedia Brown a common thief. Can you get back my money, Bugs? The law takes care of his kind, said Bugs, patting Officer Hall on the shoulder. Don't worry. Your money will be returned. Sally was beside herself with rage. You don't really believe them? She protested to Officer Hall. They're lying. This is nothing but a plot to get us in trouble. Didn't you hear what was said? I couldn't hear from inside the dress shop, admitted the policeman. But I saw everything clearly while Bugs explained what was going on. I'm sure he did a very good job, said Encyclopedia, except for... For what? 3. The Case of the False Teeth. Sunday afternoon, Encyclopedia and Sally went to the beach. They took a football. They should have taken a kite. A strong wind was sweeping in from the ocean. It blew their tosses into palm trees and sunbathers. I'm tired of dirty looks, said Sally. Let's build something. We can build an atom smasher, said Encyclopedia. They put aside the football and dug in the sand. The atom smasher was nearly finished when it was smashed. Freddie Zacharias walked right through it. Freddie worked hard all summer combing the beaches. He collected the rare bottles and shells which his father sold at his gift shop on Oceanfront Drive. "I'm sorry," Freddie apologized. "I wasn't looking where I was going." "Never mind," said Encyclopedia. "We've had our fun. You're lucky we didn't build a hole." "So am I," said Freddie. "If I'd fallen in, I might have bitten myself all over." "What did you say?" asked Encyclopedia. Freddie put down the jar he was carrying. Inside it were several sets of false teeth. "During the week I help my father," he said. "On Sundays, I'm in business for myself." Encyclopedia stared at the jar. He tried not to imagine Freddie stealing up on sunbathers and slipping out their false teeth while they slept. "I find them in the shallows," said Freddie. "Sunday is always the best day. False teeth that get lost off Key South take a week to be carried north to Idyllwild." Key South was a big fishing and vacation area, and cruise ships put in there on Sundays. Freddie explained that lots of false teeth were lost overboard by tourists and fishermen. Others were jarred loose from swimmers' mouths by waves. "The Idyllwild News prints ads for lost teeth," he said. "Usually, there is a reward." He showed the detectives 2 ads he had clipped from the newspaper. Each promised a reward for the return of teeth lost over the past weekend. "I measure the teeth I find and write to the people who place the ads," said Freddie. "So far this summer I've returned 8 sets of teeth. The reward money paid for my new 10-speed bicycle." "Hopping choppers," exclaimed Encyclopedia. "Out of the mouths of grown-ups." "Don't just stand there, Freddie," urged Sally. "Be on your way. Keep looking." "All right," said Freddie. "I'm really sorry about stepping on your sand thing." He moved off down the beach, eyes on the surf line. The detectives took a swim. The wind was still blowing in from the ocean as strongly as ever when they quit the water. They decided to build a bigger atom smasher. They had just begun when Freddie came running up. "Some kid stole my teeth," he cried. "Who?" asked Encyclopedia. "2 tigers, Duke Kelly and Rocky Graham," replied Freddie. He was about to break into tears. "The big goons," said Sally, clenching her fists. "When I catch them, they'll need false teeth themselves." "Maybe we can get back your teeth, Freddie," said Encyclopedia calmly. "Let's go talk with Duke and Rocky." As they headed down the beach, Freddie related what had happened. Duke Kelly had snatched the jar as he had walked past. When the 2 tigers saw what was inside, they laughed and took out the teeth. Duke went into a Spanish dance, stomping and whirling and clicking teeth like castanets. "Duke got careless," said Freddie. As he was clicking and stomping and whirling, he swung his hands too close to his head. He bit himself in the right ear. "Serves him right," said Sally. "It made him awful sore at me," said Freddie. He kicked over the jar and the ads flew out. Rocky caught them and read them to Duke. "They told me to beat it." "They're hoping to get the rewards themselves," exclaimed Sally. "We'd better hurry." "There's Duke under that palm tree," said Encyclopedia. Duke was lying in the shade, holding his sore ear. Neither Rocky nor the jar was in sight. "Rocky's probably taken the teeth back to the Tigers' clubhouse," said Sally. Duke saw them approaching. He sat up, watching Sally uneasily. "Where's Rocky?" inquired Encyclopedia. "He went home," said Duke. "Too much sunburn." "You stole Freddie's false teeth," Sally accused. "Give them back." "Stole," cried Duke. "After all I did for him, he accuses me of stealing?" Just what have you done for him? Said Encyclopedia. He was walking past me with a jar under his arm, said Duke. Suddenly he tripped. A couple of newspaper clippings fell out, and some false teeth. The teeth bit your ear, I suppose, said Sally. Nah, the clippings blew into the ocean, said Duke. I tried to save them and stumbled. I fell with my head under water. A crab bit me. When I needed help, where was your Freddy? Running off with his jar. Sorry, Duke, said Encyclopedia. You tried, but you blew it. What was Duke's mistake? 4. The case of the skin diver. When Encyclopedia and Sally went fishing in Mill Pond, they got there early in the morning before anyone else. But Friday morning they weren't the earliest. As they arrived, Triskford was climbing up the slope from the pond. He was moaning. Where do you hurt? Asked Sally, hurrying to his side. In my calendar, said Trisk. Don't you know what day this is? Friday, said Sally. Friday the 13th, corrected Trisk, whose real name was Bruce. Trisk was short for triskaidekaphobe, which means someone who is afraid of the number 13. I don't believe in unlucky numbers, said Sally. It's plain silly. Is it? Said Trisk. When was the last time you saw a building with a 13th floor? If a black cat crosses your path today, you better hop on the nearest bus. Even if I don't have a fur piece to go? Said Sally. It's no joke, said Trisk. 5 minutes ago I nearly got a terrible pain in my neck. He explained. He had awakened at sunrise. Rather than spend the day in the closet, he had decided to hide in the fresh air. I walked down to the pond, he said. But I got bored sitting in the bushes. I started scaling stones on the water. Suddenly I saw something shining on the ground. It was a gold earring. Golly, said Encyclopedia. I'll bet it's the one Mrs. Adams lost at the Girl Scout picnic last month. Where is it? I was holding it when a mean kid stepped out of the bushes, said Trisk. He stole it. Then he chopped the air with his hand and said, Scram, or I'll give you a double chin in the back of your neck. What did he look like? Asked Encyclopedia. I couldn't tell, answered Trisk. He had on a glass face mask. Well, what was he wearing? I just told you, said Trisk. A face mask. He must have been going skin diving in only his skin. How old was he? Said Sally. What was the color of his hair? He was about 12, replied Trisk. He had brown hair, parted down the middle. He's probably all dressed by now, said Encyclopedia. But if we hurry, we might catch him. The 3 children ran down the slope. The pond was half a mile long, and the shore curved and twisted with hiding places. For a minute they saw no one. There he is, exclaimed Encyclopedia. A boy, fully clothed, had appeared from some bushes a few yards away. He carried a face mask and a towel. It's that good-for-nothing Marlin Hayes, said Sally. Marlin was a lazy 7th grader. Last year his father wanted him to take a summer job cutting lawns. Instead, Marlin took up karate, the better to fight working. It couldn't have been Marlin, said Trisk. His hair is the same color, but it's parted on the side. So it is, observed Sally. Nevertheless, she ran up to Marlin and gripped him by the arm. You stole an earring from Trisk, she said. Give it back. Sally P. Please, gasped Encyclopedia. He had seen karate experts chop boards in half, bare-handed. I know you, said Marlin, looking down his nose. You're the little chick who has the tigers scared cuckoo. And you're Mr. Know-It-All. And you must be the kid who wears earrings. Trisk reddened. His hands clenched, but all he held was his tongue. Sally wasn't so easily frightened. You stole the earring while you were walking to the water to skin dive, she said to Marlin. Your head is out of town, Marlin retorted. I was skin diving when this kid started scaling stones. One nearly hit me. So I came ashore and asked him to stop. If you're innocent, you won't care if we search you, said Encyclopedia. Right on, said Marlin with an amused smile. I'll help. He turned the pockets of his pants and